Director Clapper, General Alexander, I thank you for being here. I thank you for your service to our nation. I'd like to address two topics. One, the issue of the impact of the government shutdown on the intelligence community, and then I'd like to follow up with some specific questions about the many privacy concerns that have been raised. With respect to the shutdown, I think the testimony that the two of you have provided today is deeply disturbing. That 70% of the civilian intelligence force has been furloughed is reason for concern to everyone, and I very much agree with Senator Lindsey Graham, who observed that the person who should be most out front correcting this is our commander-in-chief. And I don't believe President Obama should be playing politics with this. He shouldn't be refusing to negotiate or compromise. He should be stepping forward to correct this problem right now. As Senator Flake noticed, this week we saw what Congress can do when there's bipartisan cooperation to address a need. Namely, earlier this week, the United States Senate unanimously passed legislation that the House had already passed to fund the men and women of our military. It was the right thing to do. I took to the Senate floor to commend Majority Leader Harry Reid for not objecting to that legislation, for agreeing not to hold the men and women of our military hostage, regardless of what happens in this government shutdown. Director Clapper has presented a recommendation here to this committee today that the intelligence community needs to be funded. And I've heard the concerns raised by my friend Senator Klobuchar, my friend Senator Cruz. I hope we can see bipartisan cooperation today. Republicans and Democrats in the Senate agree to come together today to pass a clean continuing resolution funding the Department of Defense and our intelligence communities. If the Senate cooperates, we could get this passed by the end of the day. We could respond to the national security threat these two gentlemen have laid out, and the only impediment to doing so is the prospect that Majority Leader Harry Reid would object to doing so. If, God forbid, we see an attack on the United States because the intelligence community was not adequately funded, every member of this committee would be horrified. So I hope that issues of partisan politics can be set aside and we can all come together and pass right now, by the end of the day, a continuing resolution to fully fund the Department of Defense and the intelligence community. I hope President Obama, I hope Majority Leader Harry Reid hear and respond to the candid and heartfelt recommendation, Director Clapper, that you presented here today. Let me move on to the second topic. The issue of privacy. General Alexander, in a recent Senate Intelligence Committee hearing, when asked about whether the agency wants, quote, the phone records of all Americans, you testified, quote, I believe it is in the nation's best interest to put all the phone records into a lockbox that we can search when the nation needs to do it. Besides phone records, what other records of all American citizens do you believe the federal government should be collecting?
I can't think of any right now. And there has been, so thanks, Senator, for that question, because earlier this came up about the Saturday article. We don't collect in bulk all those things that were said. Those were focused on foreign, but they didn't have foreign voter or foreign X in front of it. From my perspective, I can't think of other bulk records that we would need, like phone. I do think as we look at the phone data, we're going to have to look at how that changes as we bring mobility in, and that's been the question of it. And so we released to the Intel committees today clarification so they understood the difference on locational data and those requirements. I do think that right now we're going to have to evolve as the threat evolves, but I can't think of any, and that was a long-winded, I can't think of any, I apologize.
Also before the Intelligence Committee, General Alexander, you declined to answer whether the NSA had ever tried to gather data about the location of phone calls. And there was some suggestion that from Senator Wyden that this was a classified matter. My question to you is, in your personal opinion, do you believe the NSA needs to collect GPS location information on American citizens to prevent terrorism?
So we did send a statement to the Intel committees, and if I could just read it real quick because it addresses what your question is. As NSA has previously reported to the Senate and House Intelligence Oversight Committees, NSA does not collect locational information under Section 215 of the Patriot Act. In 2010 and 2011, NSA received samples in order to test the ability of its systems to handle the data format, but that data was not used for any other purposes and was never available for intelligence analysis purposes. In a 25 June 2013 closed hearing with the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, NSA promised to notify the Congress before any locational data was collected. Moreover, as noted in the Foreign Intelligence and Surveillance Court's most recent opinion, I think it's called footnote number 5, on the program, the government would also be required to seek the court's approval of the production of locational data before acquiring it under this program. I would just say that this may be something that is a future requirement for the country, but it is not right now because when we identify a number, we can give that to the FBI. When they get their probable cause, then they can get the locational data that they need. And that's the reason we stopped in 2011.
Thank you, General Alexander. If I may ask one brief follow-up question.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Absent a search warrant particularized to an individual suspected terrorist, does the NSA currently have the ability and access to voicemail content, to text messages, or to financial records that are now being collected by the CFPB on millions of American citizens?
I apologize, I'm not familiar, Senator, with CFPB.
The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Not that I know of, Senator, no. In fact, to be clear, if we have to go after any U.S. person, and it would almost always be an FBI, not an NSA lead, has to have a probable cause warrant, and you'd have to go through the probable cause, whether it's under a regular court or the FISA court, depending on the type of action.
And is that answer the same for voicemail content and text messages?
Voicemail, all content, any targeting of a U.S. person would have to be done that way. For metadata, it is always started with a nexus with Al-Qaeda related, the queries and reasonable articulable suspicion.
Thank you, General Alexander. Thank you, Director Clapper.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. Before I ask my question, I'm going to ask Senator Hirono